Imagine an empire so powerful that it controlled 3 continents, the world's most important trade routes, and the strongest military of its era. No rival could defeat it directly, no invasion brought it down, no single war ended it, and yet it collapsed at its peak. Not when it was weak, but when it believed it was untouchable. That empire was the Ottoman Empire. And the reason it fell is the same mistake powerful nations keep repeating today, including America. The Ottoman Empire didn't collapse suddenly. It collapsed slowly while still looking strong. At its height, the Ottomans controlled Southeast Europe, the Middle East, North Africa. The most critical land and sea trade routes between East and West Istanbul wasn't just a capital. It was a global choke point. If goods moved between Asia and Europe, the Ottoman Empire decided how and at what cost. From the outside, this looked like permanent dominance. But inside the system, pressure was building. The Ottomans made a dangerous assumption. If we control everything important, we can manage anything. That assumption always kills empires. Because control is not the same as sustainability. As the empire expanded, 3 problems grew quietly. Overextension territory grew faster than administration. The empire became too large to manage efficiently. Local governors gained power. Corruption increased. Central authority weakened. Slowly, invisibly. Military cost explosion. The Ottomans depended on constant military readiness to defend borders across 3 continents. That required permanent armies, endless logistics, rising taxes. Increasing debt power was no longer generating wealth. It was consuming it. Refusal to adapt. While Europe modernized finance, technology, and institutions, the Ottoman system protected tradition over efficiency. Not because leaders were stupid, but because change threatened existing power structures. And this is the critical pattern. Empires don't fail because they can't change. They fail because changing threatens the people in control. So they delay. The Ottoman Empire delayed reform while believing military strength would compensate. It worked until it didn't. Because power can delay consequences, but it cannot cancel them. This is why collapse often comes after the peak, not before it. And this is where the parallel with America begins. America today still controls global financial systems, military dominance, key trade routes, institutional influence. From the outside, everything still works. Which is exactly why the danger is easy to miss. The Ottoman Empire didn't collapse because it lacked power. It collapsed because it ignored a warning that every empire receives, and almost every empire misunderstands. That warning is simple. When maintaining power costs more than the system produces, decline has already begun. The Ottomans reached this moment quietly. No panic, no collapse headlines, no dramatic turning point, just numbers moving in the wrong direction. The illusion of control. For centuries, the Ottomans believed geography guaranteed safety. They controlled the Bosporus, the Dardanelles, the crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa. As long as trade flowed through their territory, they believed money would follow. And for a long time, it did. But global systems don't stay still. In the 16th and 17th centuries, something fundamental changed. Europe didn't try to conquer Ottoman trade routes. It bypassed them, new sea routes, new financial systems, new commercial institutions. Trade slowly shifted away from Ottoman land power to European naval power. This was the warning. The empire still looked strong militarily, but its economic leverage was weakening, and instead of adapting, the Ottomans doubled down on control. More regulation, higher taxes, tighter monopolies. They tried to force the old system to keep working. That never works. The cost trap. As revenue efficiency declined, expenses exploded. The empire faced a choice. Reduce commitments, modernize administration, accept a smaller role, or maintain the illusion of dominance, expand military spending, borrow to cover gaps. The Ottomans chose the second option. That decision created a trap, because once an empire funds stability with debt, it becomes hostage to time. Every year requires more revenue, more borrowing, more coercion. Eventually, power stops being strategic and becomes defensive. The Ottomans weren't conquering anymore. They were holding on. Why this warning was ignored. Here's the part most history books skip. The Ottoman leadership knew there were problems, but reform threatened entrenched elites, military hierarchies, religious authority, tax collectors, regional power brokers. Fixing the system meant weakening those who benefited from it, so reforms were delayed, half implemented, or reversed. This is the most dangerous moment for any empire, when leaders know change is required but believe delay is safer than disruption. History shows the opposite. Delay makes collapse uncontrollable. The modern parallel. This is why the Ottoman story matters today. America hasn't lost power. America hasn't been defeated. America hasn't collapsed. But like the Ottomans, it faces the same warning signs: rising costs of global leadership, increasing reliance on debt, expanding military commitments, declining efficiency in core systems, political resistance to structural reform. And like the Ottomans, the system still works. For now. That's what makes the warning easy to ignore. Empires don't fall when people are afraid. They fall when leaders believe tomorrow will look like yesterday. The Ottoman Empire didn't refuse to reform. That's the myth. The truth is more dangerous. It reformed too late, and in the wrong order. This is the phase where empires believe they're fixing the problem, but are actually locking in failure. The desperation reforms. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Ottoman leaders could no longer deny reality. European powers had superior weapons, modern banking, disciplined armies, industrial production. So the Ottomans launched reforms. New armies, new uniforms, new legal codes, new bureaucracies. On the surface, this looked like modernization. But here's the fatal mistake. They copied the appearance of European power without building the economic foundation beneath it. Modern armies require stable revenue, efficient taxation, industrial output, logistics networks. The Ottomans had none of these at scale. So how did they fund modernization? Debt. Borrowing strength, instead of building it. To modernize quickly, the empire turned to European lenders. At first, loans felt harmless, small amounts, low interest, emergency funding. But debt has a personality. It doesn't stay quiet. Each loan came with foreign oversight, revenue pledges, customs control, financial supervision. Eventually, European creditors controlled ports, railways, tax collection, state monopolies. The empire still had an army, but it no longer controlled its own money. That's when sovereignty quietly disappears, not with invasion, with paperwork, the illusion of progress. From the outside, the empire looked reformed. Modern uniforms, Western-style institutions, constitutional experiments, reorganized ministries. But internally, the economy was hollowing out. Local producers collapsed. Foreign imports dominated. Taxes rose. Public resentment grew. The state became modern, but weaker. This is a pattern history repeats. When reform prioritizes speed over sequence, systems break faster. You can't modernize the top before stabilizing the base. The American parallel. This is where the Ottoman story starts sounding uncomfortably familiar. America isn't avoiding reform. It's reforming through massive borrowing, financial engineering, monetary expansion, global leverage, instead of rebuilding productivity first. Just like the Ottomans, modern systems look advanced. Markets function. Institutions operate. Power projects outward. But the cost structure keeps rising, and the solution keeps being the same: more debt. Debt doesn't cause collapse immediately. It causes fragility, which means when stress arrives, the system has no flexibility left. The critical mistake. The Ottomans believed if we modernize fast enough, we can outrun decline. History shows the opposite. Rushed reform without foundation accelerates failure, because it raises expectations, increases costs, weakens trust, and removes margin for error. Empires don't collapse when borders fall. They collapse when choices disappear. For the Ottoman Empire, that moment arrived quietly. No invasion, no dramatic defeat, no global headline, just loss of control. When debt turned into direction, by the late 19th century, Ottoman debt had crossed a dangerous line. It wasn't just large, it was structural. The empire was no longer borrowing to grow. It was borrowing to survive, to pay soldiers, to service old loans, to keep the state running. And that's when creditors stopped being lenders. They became decision makers. In 1881, the Ottoman Empire created the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. This was the point of no return. Foreign representatives, mostly British and French, were given direct control over customs revenues, salt and tobacco monopolies, railway income, major tax streams. The empire still had a flag, still had an army, still had a sultan, but it no longer controlled its own cash flow. That is not sovereignty, that is managed decline. The illusion of power continued. Here's what made this phase dangerous. To the outside world, the Ottomans still looked like a state. Diplomats attended summits, armies marched, treaties were signed. But internally, policy was constrained, budgets were dictated, military spending depended on approval, reform became performative. This is the most fragile phase of any empire, because leaders can no longer choose what to stop doing. They can only choose what to delay. Rising tensions. Inside the empire. As control slipped outward, pressure built inward. Taxes increased, living costs rose, ethnic tensions sharpened, local autonomy. Demands grew. The empire responded the only way it still could. Centralization, surveillance, force. But force without resources doesn't restore control, it just increases resistance. This is when empires stop governing and start managing unrest. A sign decline has already begun. The American echo. This is the uncomfortable parallel. America has not lost control, but it is losing optionality. Every major decision today is constrained by debt servicing costs, market reactions, global financial stability, alliance expectations. Choices still exist, but they're narrower. Just like the Ottomans before their fall, America still looks powerful, but the cost of every action is higher, and the cost of inaction is rising faster. The invisible threshold empires don't cross collapse thresholds loudly. They cross them when spending is locked in, commitments can't be reduced, debt dictates policy, credibility matters more than sustainability. That's the moment the Ottomans crossed. Not when territory was lost, but when financial independence vanished. Once that happens, history shows only one outcome. Not immediate collapse, but irreversible direction. The Ottoman Empire did not fall in a single moment. It expired. Slowly, predictably, and quietly. By the early 20th century, the empire still existed on maps, but functionally, it was already hollow. When reform becomes desperation. The Ottomans knew they were in trouble. They tried everything. Constitutional reforms, military modernization, Western-style institutions, new legal systems, central banking experiments. But every reform arrived after leverage was lost. That's the rule. History never breaks. Reform only works when you still control your options. The Ottomans didn't. Debt dictated budgets. Foreign powers dictated trade. Internal unrest dictated politics. Reform became symbolic, not structural. The fatal timing error empires don't die because they refuse to reform. They die because they reform too late. By the time the Ottomans seriously tried to modernize, rivals had already surpassed them, internal unity had fractured, economic independence was gone. World War I didn't kill the Ottoman Empire. It simply revealed that it was already gone. Once the war ended, the empire dissolved rapidly, not because it lost battles, but because there was nothing left holding it together. What actually ended the empire? Not nationalism, not religion, not foreign invasion. The Ottoman Empire ended because it lost economic sovereignty, couldn't scale back commitments, it tried to maintain prestige without capacity, it delayed hard choices until none remained. That's the real cause. The American crossroads. Now comes the uncomfortable question. Is America collapsing? No. Is America declining? Not necessarily. But America is approaching the same decision zone the Ottomans faced, a moment where debt limits, flexibility, global commitments exceed comfort, power must be constantly demonstrated, adjustment feels like weakness. This is the most dangerous phase, because the system still works, and when systems still work, leaders push them harder. That's how empires overshoot. The difference that still exists, here's the critical distinction. The Ottoman Empire did not have a choice when its final phase arrived. America still does, but the window is narrowing. History is clear on this point. Empires that adjust early remain influential. Empires that delay adjustment lose control of the timeline. The Ottomans waited, and history chose for them. America hasn't reached that point yet, but the warning signs are no longer subtle. The question isn't whether America will fall. The question is, will it adjust voluntarily, or be forced to adjust by markets, debt, and circumstance? That choice defines whether history rhymes or repeats. And that's why the Ottoman Empire matters, not as a cautionary tale, but as a map. If you want to understand the next global shift, don't watch the headlines. Study the empires that collapsed while they still believed they were strong. Because that's where the real lessons are. Subscribe.